Okay, I think we'll just get started as people trickle back.
Yeah.
I'm gonna introduce Oneil. Oneil Howell actually was one of my very first master's students here at UF. He came through UF's core program. And then after graduation, we had a lot of interesting talks about video games, right? And then eventually he went to work in New York at Avalanche Studios, which did a couple of AAA titles, Just Cause 2, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And then he moved to San Francisco and worked for Facebook Meta for a little bit. But currently he's with Bad Robot Studios, which is J.J. Abrams' gaming arm, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Perfect. Yep.
All right. So and by the way, well, right now you're a senior level designer, but what I remember from your previous name cards is that your job title was called World Designer.
Yeah.
It's a job title I envy very, very much. Take it away.
Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone. I apologize that I cannot be there in person. I had a work obligation this week, traveling and stuff like that, but I'm glad I was able to meet you guys halfway via Zoom. But yeah, I think Lee basically covered most of everything in the intros. Yeah, games. That's what I'm doing. So yeah, my name is Oneil Howell, senior level designer. Currently, again, working at Bad Robot Studios in Santa Monica, California, J.J. Abrams Studios. I'm a member of maybe possibly 5 designers in a team of like 60 people so far. So it's mid-tier studios that's working alongside their film division and film, sound, and game, of course. So yeah, in this presentation here, I'll be basically covering a lot of the stuff that I've worked on, from traditional games to AR, VR. Unfortunately, I can't touch much on Bad Robot itself and the game that I'm currently working on because it's all wrapped up in NDA stuff. So yeah, let's get started. So redefining immersion in the digital world. So with this title here, I'm basically covering various IPs and tech that I've worked on throughout my career. My goal is to always be able to establish more immersive spaces that are not just boring, static, linear experiences, but more proactive in engaging the user, giving them the user the tools, the environment, and technology to properly immerse themselves in the digital space. And that's kind of my trademark and what I've been doing throughout my career. A little bit of, again, some background on myself here. From Jamaica, grew up in South Florida with you guys. What else? I am a huge nerd, as you can tell. Some of the things I'm heavily involved in, games, comics, all that stuff. I do a lot of outdoor activities and camping as well, and you will see that actually ties into my world design background and my passion for topography and geography and stuff like that being applied to the digital space. And of course, a UF grad, so go Gators. So this is kind of like my formula here. So what it takes to make an immersive space. And before I start, this is the thing I kind of ask myself, like, how do I do it? And this formula here kind of keeps my compass kind of north on how to do that digital space. So it starts off with like excellent design and foremost. I mean, you have to design something that is built in a way that is with the human element at the forefront of it. How are they going to experience that space? The next thing I do is actually focus on the world. That has to be well designed depending on the current user, and it can depend on whatever platform they're using. And of course, the story is what the player gives them their objective, their goal. Like, what and why am I actually moving and traversing this environment? And last but not least, the technology, which I've used a lot over the years, but technology being the kind of sort of the conduit to help us actually like break into that digital realm. So I look here and I ask, some of you may ask, like, so how does a digital environment like VR and traditional games differ from like other mediums like radio, television? Well, I guess we can start with radio. For me, it's always been kind of a passive experience without imagery. Your imagination has to fill in the gaps. And that in itself already locks it into a passive experience. Everything's being dictated to you. And same thing with television. You do have the visuals. You're able to see what's going on. But then again, your eyes are being engaged, but you're not fully engaging that experience. You're not dictating that experience. So today in this age, I'm fortunate to be part of that. We have digital games and VR and stuff like that are more reactive. And I love to call it myself, or the player, the protagonist. You determine the story, you push the story along. You're actively dictating how the world responds and reacts based off of your decisions and the things you do. And many of you may be also asking, how come I transitioned from architecture to, I would love to say, and I coin it in my studio, digital architect. So I love traditional architecture. It's beautiful. I mean, it's some of the work that's out there. It's groundbreaking from a immersion standpoint. But what I really love about digital spaces, I mean, you can just tell, like watching the movie Inception or The Matrix and things like that, like they're more dynamic, unpredictable, without limitations. It has an agile spatial storytelling that happens at every turn, especially some of the most successful games. I'm going to name drop a couple, like Control yeah, Control is one that primarily comes to mind, and the image that you see there is actually from a game Control. You move into this space. It's all brutalist architecture, and depending on your response or your actions, the space manipulates and moves and changes to you, and the player abilities to basically as a tool to move forward in the game's objectives. Well, a tool that I've actually taken from architecture that's kind of dear to my heart and I always use all the time, especially when communicating, conveying my ideas to fellow designers and also artists, is the idea of like phenomenology. I always ask myself, like, how is your environment interacting with the player, and what the following emotional feedback that happens. If it's not engaging the senses in any way, of course, it's always visuals can be the first, of course, and using VR and stuff like that, there's other senses to be applied. But if you're not invoking an emotional response, then to me, it's not immersive enough. So I'll always like ask myself, or even though they sometimes hate it, ask my fellow artists on the team, what are we doing to making our spaces more immersive, and how is it engaging our senses? How is it engaging our emotional state? And again, some of the tactics we use is like, material play, light, shadow, frequency, sound, which is a huge thing, especially when you have the new tech where sound can actually bounce and resonate in different ways based off of proximity to the player. Texture, scale, touch, all that comes into play there when you're creating interesting environments. So Lee brought it up earlier. Throughout my 10, 11-year career, I've been bouncing between these two, I guess, descriptive positions here. It's a level designer and world designer. The best way to differentiate between the two, a level designer is more small scale. I consider them actually almost a traditional architect for digital space. You're designing more smaller scale environments, no bigger than a town. I know town sounds large, but wait to hear what a world designer does. But a level designer, we create the flow and the pacing and the actual static elements or the structural elements of a level. Because those are the areas that a player will be moving through. And those areas tend to be more smaller scale. And the term we use is moment to moment. So we literally think about every doorway you go through, what's the next experience? So that's smaller scale. And we work more so heavily with the art director on that front. A world designer, you literally have to come up with the narrative of the world, and you're creating and designing an entire world from some games, universes, like games like Mass Effect and stuff like that, if you're fellow gamers out there, to the games that I've worked on, say, for instance, the Just Cause series, Rage, or several of those. And those environments are totaling at some points. I think the largest I've worked on was 800 square miles. But the Just Cause series, which I'll be showing, is about 500 to 400 square miles. So you have to have a little bit of a urban planner in you. You have to understand flow of traffic and road networks, and even human psychology, being our AI, which I will be touching on, how our AI or people move through these worlds. So you have to be almost a jack of all trades as a world designer to design a space that is fully lived in and realized at a much larger scale. Here you're looking at sort of like what I've done, my trajectory so far. So I've spent a good stint of my time in console games and, open world traditional level building and smaller scale levels and stuff within large scale games, to VR, which I've done at Facebook for almost 2.5 years. Large scale VR, small scale, and the really cool one I'm excited to show you guys is like co-location and shared space. And as for Bad Robot, I am also doing something similar to that vein, but heavily driven on narrative. And I'll be hopefully sharing with you guys sometime in the future. And yeah, this is my work experience here. These are some of the titles I've worked on, not including DLCs or indie titles, and the studios and locations that I've worked. And you can kind of see my timeline. So first area that we're going to go into is the open world. The open world, a best way of describing is like open-ended. It's non-linear experience that has, is all about exploration. You, the player, decides the outcome. It is an experience without a hand-holding. So it's unlimited freedom. You walk and you explore the world without any tethers or tying you down to a singular objective. Especially with being you as a player, you almost get a chance to command the narrative and decide on how the sequel of events will go. A lot of successful games I can name drop are like Fallout and The Witcher, and of course our series here, Just Cause. So I'm going to show you guys a quick video. It was a marketing piece of our Just Cause that came out. This is Just Cause 4. We've made Just Cause 2, which Lee was referring to, Just Cause 3, and Just Cause 4 are the ones that I've worked on. Just Cause 4 was our most recent title. It's an open world action shooter with smart adaptive AI. It has AI learning within each character, and I'll be discussing that more in detail. Real world physics, and we use an engine within internally that we've adapted called the Havoc engine, that has basically any object in the world has its own physical characteristics that can be tied to the real world. So again, that adds another layer of immersion. Yeah, you're gonna see it here. Here is the piece, and I will give you guys a heads up. So this game here, this game essentially what's been described as if Michael Bay had a baby with a stick of dynamite. So be mindful that it's gonna be all over the place, explosion galore, action, eye candy stuff. So here's the trailer that we for our first round of marketing for Just Cause. And let me know if it's too loud or you can't hear it at all. If you can't.
No sound.
No sound?
No.
All right. Let me.
Okay, you will have to share your screen.
You might have to share your computer audio with Zoom.
Yes, that's what I need to do. I totally forgot that step. All right, 1 second here. Where are you?
You should probably unshare your screen, and then when sharing again, there.
There we go. Share your screen. Share your sound. And the right screen. Nope. Screen 2. All right. Hopefully this works. Oh, let me go back to the slide. F11. Try this again, round 2. Yeah? There we go.
I was born to fight wars that no army could win. There was no fear, no failure, But the rules have changed. The enemy changed. And no one was ready for it.
The Black Hand. They are the world's most powerful private army. But even they should fear what they've created. This isn't a war, Rico. This is survival.
Does that happen a lot? Want me getting shot at? All the time.
So, all right. So yeah, that's essentially just cause there. So that's, you get an idea of what the world is about. It's massive. It's filled with all these opportunities for the player to find their term of use, find their fun in these worlds here. As you can see, one of the biggest like selling points is the physics in it and the AI, the weather systems, all that's in here. So you can tell here you have like smart adaptive AI systems in here. Previous, I think from Just Cause 2 and before, and many games before that point, the AI were actually given their particular characteristic and they'd run that cycle over and over again. In our game, we created almost a learning tree within each character, whether it be the enemy AI or the combative AI or the civilian AI. And depending on how the player plays and how the player reacts and responds to the world, they learn and they continue to grow. So each player in their playthrough will have a completely different experience than from another player. And that in itself gave it a level of immersion and differentness from other players. Real-time physics calculation, again, the havoc system in here. Before, explosions were just a similar pulse and everything would explode in the same direction at the same time. Environments would be destroyed at the same direction at the same time. So we're able to actually apply weight to each object, and according to the weight, when you add the pulse, as you can see from this guy's facial expression here, the boat would generally kind of explode in the proper direction and speed of the materials flying in different in all sorts of realistic simulated directions. We also had day and night cycles in this world. It was pretty common at that point, but when you coupled that with the civilian AI, the day and night cycles, we built into it in which, like, when you're just moving around, it's observing the world. The AI would actually walk and go to work. In the morning, you'll see more traffic on the street in the morning, and then towards the evening, you'll see them going to the schools or place of rest, which is their homes or the deli and things like that. And you'll see that clock like moving, the world moving and ebbing and flowing when it comes to like how the world resembles ours. Again, this one here, with this title, was 400 square miles. We modeled a lot of what we have in the first two games off of the Mediterranean coastal lines. And then in our fourth title, which you saw for the trailer, that was actually all South America. We incorporated a lot of Central America. We incorporated a lot of like GIS data that we use. So the GIS data, the height map data, we take, like, for instance, in the middle of the world, you have Mount Fitzroy, or in the Amazon biome, we'd have Angel Falls, and we'd grab that DEM data and use it in the real in this game here, and almost get a one-to-one experience of some people that have actually been to Mount Fitzroy in Patagonia or Angel Falls. They can see it in the game, fully realized and represented in the third person perspective. And of course, our proprietary thing we had was volumetric terrain. So most terrain is actually casted from a two-dimensional standpoint, looking down, and then you see it extruded geometrically. From the player perspective, they can't tell until they walk up to it and maybe try going through. So what we created was volumetric terrain in which we were able to punch holes through the geometry, and the geometry would backfill and create caves and caverns and stuff like that. So I think in the next video here, we'll be showing you how many of work with, how they created this world. We have the art director in there, the game lead executive designer as well, and the studio head, just talking about how the world, the sounds and everything, we created the world. And in this case, the world of Solus, which is a South American make-believe country, of course, but a lot of the South American influences. Let's move there and let's cover the world. A lot of attention to detail.
This time around, we want players to really care about this world, really feel like they understand this world, and they really are get drawn into it.
At any one moment, in any particular direction, the player can see something they haven't seen before and go to it and explore it.
In Just Cause 4, we enter into the beautiful South American world of Solis. Vertical environments, gorgeous, diverse biomes. This is one world we cannot wait to explore.
It's taking everything that we found interesting and amazing about South America as a whole continent and cherry-picking those bits and pieces and putting it together as a big world.
It's a bit of a hybrid of a lot of different countries. We didn't want to just pick one and emulate it.
We actually were able to take a trip to Peru just to capture the sounds of the different biomes there.
How do you write a history for a fictional place?
Oh, that's a great question.
Okay, let's start from the narrative, okay? Who lives here? What does these people do? And then from there, we build the pieces and we make the town.
Where the game starts is not where the history of the island starts. We went back to 500 years to try to create a historical context for the island that makes sense once you arrive there.
Say in the grasslands, that will be composed of more contemporary buildings, where if you go up to the rainforest, where the original settlers came in, those buildings tend to be more of a colonial style.
We developed river technology for it, meaning that river now have currents, and currents change dynamically.
So we have 4 biomes or regions in Just Cause 4. But within each of those, there's between 2 to 4 different sub-biomes. And it's a way for us to add variety in a very big landscape.
Just Cause is a vertical game. We always want to stress the verticality. We always want to bring that in. We want the game to be fully three-dimensional.
We've gone from talking about square kilometers to cubic kilometers, which is fantastic.
In JC3, we mainly sculpted a lot of it by hand. This time around, we wanted to take that with us. It's still an important step, but we introduced scan data that we can take in, lift it into the engine, and then move it around and reshape it however we want to.
It's not top-down projected map, it's hollow. You have caves, you have cave systems, you have tunnels, so it's more than meets the eye at first glance.
So if you take one of our beautiful locations, it's called El Abismo. It's sort of a slum bridge juxtaposed with favelas that you might see from Rio de Janeiro in South America. These two things are combined in a vertical space.
We actually have a credo at Avalanche. If you can see it, you can go there. If you poke it, it reacts. And that really goes through in everything we do, and particularly so in Just Cause 4.
So one of the phrases that we like to say is a world that Just Cause deserves. But the world that Just Cause deserves, one of the things that we really want to do was create a playground that feels relatable. So that no matter how long you play this game, you're always going to see something new.
Yeah, so pretty much like they were touching on, we made multiple trips down to South America, Argentina, Uruguay, and Chile, and Brazil, and taking a lot of audio, a lot of reference images, a lot of detail that we brought into this world here. We actually went to the Museum of Modern Art while we were in New York, and brought in a specialist, indigenous specialist, who studied indigenous art, cultures, music, everything. And she was a person who help us as a team make this world way more authentic. So gives you a slice. It's a nice slice, but it's a vertical slice of like what the essence of South America could be. So yeah, it's pretty amazing, and it's a massive world. I mean, you can jump in a car or a vehicle and you drive around for hours because it's huge, but you won't see the same thing twice. So next, we'll be touching on the AI. And the AI in this game, in our world here, here's a quick video of the world's AI. Each AI instance has its own, like I said before, its own behavior built in procedurally. They have their own faction tag, meaning their group of which they are affiliated with. Behavioral patterns. We use this scripting tool called with the behavioral tree, and we basically pick all these components that make up that character's behavior. And over time, through AI learning, it learns more from its interactions, its day-to-day interactions while playing. And the AI becomes more smarter over time. And with all that, you can imagine the amount of like self-generated like narrative that can happen when you have all these like AI characters like interacting with each other. And in this case here, which I'm about to show in this video, it created an organic tension that happened in one of the towns. It's between its citizens of the town and the oppressive military. And apparently the civilians of the town weren't fans of the military. So you'll see an entire like urban warfare scene that's broken out. And it's funny, while the two factions are going against each other, you can see the surrounding AI characters responding to the event that you're currently seeing on screen. If you revisit the space, especially with something of that damaging magnitude happening right there, a lot of the AI will actually leave the location and eventually come back a few days later after a few playthroughs. And all that happens without the player even interacting or doing anything. It's up to them. It's the freedom of their choice to actually come in and interact or stop what's going on or not. It's up to them. So here's a quick video of our AI interacting, especially with the two separate factions. Right Take notice of civilians running away, vehicles, actually people stepping on the gas, getting out of the scene. Now for the players, it's absolutely chaotic, but there's a lot of controlled chaos that's taken into place here when designing these characters. Again, another scene. I think here's the kind of a fight that kicked off on top of a favela. The favela bridge, which they were referring to in the video. So this is our self-created rebel force that's going against the world's military, oppressive military. And our guy to the left there realizes the battle's over, celebrates a little, a little celebration there. And I think we can really quick show some more urban warfare happening on the freeway system. you can kind of sort of tell by the time of the day, this is there's a lot of high traffic on the road. So it ends up being pretty chaotic. Yeah, so that's sort of that's pretty much the AI there. Next thing I'm going to touch on is the world physics. One of the things that we're proud of that we actually created. So in our game, we have real world physics, real fluid dynamics, real wind, and all those components that we were able to create real-time tornadoes, real-time hurricanes, floods, things of that nature. So the world would dynamically start changing and moving around you based off of the weather pattern that we created in the game. And it's all organic when it happens. So yes, let's go to, this is a quick video here. In this sequence, I'm sure you'll be seeing our bread and butter, which was the tornado. That runs through the almost the equivalent of the grasslands or the central portion of our world, and we try to use a lot of real world probabilities of where these items, or not items, but these events would take place. So this obviously makes sense, having a tornado in the grassland. Here's a video on that. Let's see if this is
Peggy 18.
For time.
In this mission, Rico's pursuing a massive tornado as it weaves a path of destruction throughout the
The
grasslands.
tornado physics literally took us 2 to 3 years.
And this is the Storm Chaser,
so
the only vehicle that allows him to do so.
Easy task.
All right, let's see what this thing can do.
Thanks to Avalanche's new Apex engine, everything you see, as well as the trajectory of every spiraling object, is being calculated in real time.
Take the Storm Chaser and get out of here. I'll get the tornado back on track.
The Black Hand have taken...
So yeah, that's pretty much the tornado sequence in our game there. And as you can see, while it's like barreling down our environments, it's picking up things, and it has the suction and release, or the vortex that was replicated in the real tornado. So yeah, as a player, that's seeing that over the top scale and magnitude of something so massive moving through the world like that, indifferent of what you're doing, can be pretty intense. All right, so now I'll be moving on to what I've been doing at Facebook and Meta. This is Facebook Meta here. So a lot of stuff I've done throughout Facebook was mostly R&D. This is kind of like the R&D phase of my career. We spent more time creating facial tracking technology, hand tracking technology, body tracking, co-location, VR, shared experiences, which I'll be covering in a second, and also physics manipulation. A lot of the things too, which you've seen before, I carried on, which I've learned from JC into these projects here. A great thing about Facebook, they appreciated us like gamifying these tools, because ultimately a lot of these tools will be used for just like, say for instance, hand tracking. It'll be virtual typewriting, or I don't know, if like seeing something remotely, whether it be like an engineer or a doctor learning how to become a surgeon via their virtual hands. But putting it in a game setting or gamifying, you unlock a lot of things that the average test wouldn't, which was geared towards that, you would never find, or create new tools that breathe from that research you're doing. So, well, this is the team I was on here. This is the Strike team. I was one of 3 designers. Awesome team. The Facebook breaks up our departments into the individual teams, and we'll work on an individual project, research project for 3 to 6 months, and gave us kind of the freedom to explore the Oculus headset and what it could fully do. So yeah, hand tracking. Some of you may not know. Again, it's a feature that's controller free. You lose the controller. There's no need to have a controller anymore. And that experience in itself was freaking amazing. Being able to interact with objects in the world, open doors, pass emails, just do these amazing things. And yeah, that was pretty amazing. And in our test case scenario, we created this game called Tiny Castles. And in this game, you're a god, quote unquote god, and you're exploring this world, and you have these not hard puzzles, but soft puzzles, meaning they're not too difficult, but is more of a demonstration of you using your hands and you fully be able to like interact and move with the world. One of the things here, if you can see how we designed hand tracking for Tiny Castles. So typical hand tracking, disclaimer, it all happens with the animation, so the IK points within the joints, as you can see here, being demonstrated here. So you have all these joints moving, and it's not actually happening in real time, at least this phase. We figured out a way to make it real time. What you're seeing here is the hand would move via the headset would capture that movement and try to replicate that movement with maybe a half a second delay. It's or less than that. So it's very negligible. You would not notice it. Once we figured out how to do that properly, we were able to actually apply physics in the world and start gathering, picking up objects, and then building a game around that. So here's sort of a demonstration of Tiny Castles from this YouTuber here.
What's happening, everybody? Kyle from VR Scout here, and today we are checking out Tiny Castles, available now on the Oculus Quest and Oculus Quest 2 via the App Lab. This is and today we are checking it out. So let's dive right in. These are my hands. Yeah, these are controlled via the Oculus Quest's hand tracking, built-in hand tracking technology. So I do not need controllers right now. These are just my own 2 hands, my own little digis. All right, so we got a playground, we have a sky temple, lava temple, ice temple, and a moss temple. All of the elements.
Like even
I guess I'll just touch, I'm assuming. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. All right. Lava temple. Grab, crank, flamethrower attack. Yeah, oh yeah, okay. Sold. Whoa, these are some, I wasn't expecting the visuals to be this impressive. This is some great atmospheric effects.
So in this level here, I created a crank system, so you're moving with your hands and getting that full motor function, rotating your hands and grabbing and pulling things. And this very simple but intuitive ways of moving around the environment with your own physical hands.
Particles look very cool. Depth is nice. Ooh, and I got some hand cranks. Alrighty. This is pretty cool.
So there you go.
It's simple, but you really you don't realize like what a difference it is to use just your hands. Here we go. Oh yeah. Okay, so my job as a god, my job as a god to make sure my little believers get across these areas safely and. Oh, your hands make a little reticle. Okay, if you can see it right there, flying around.
Of course, you can't physically move, so you have to we use the teleportation for right now, but we will be covering full body tracking in a second. Then
fingers to charge, hold. Oh, okay. Rock and roll. Yeah. All right, this is pretty cool. Oh, I got more guys. I can pull them. Pull them to me. Hello, evil creature. Oh, they took out my. Okay, my 2 dudes are safe. Second warp point.
Another simple puzzle, soft puzzle.
Oh, what do we got here? This thing's gonna shoot stuff at me, isn't it? I can grab these balls, it looks like. Okay. Ooh, Oh, yeah, okay. It's like the Avatar. A very terrible Avatar who can't aim. Okay, looks like I have a crank wheel here. Crank it up. Oh, okay, that's operating the machinery on the other side. Interesting.
But yeah, and one thing I can honestly say, which was actually pretty amazing when I implemented the crank and using the crank for the first time, actually not having a crank in front of you, but when you're moving the crank in the VR space, it's insane how your brain naturally fills in the gaps, and you feel as though, even though you're not physically touching anything, your brain would give you feedbacks, almost weird sensation, as though kind of like the ghost appendage, like you feel like you're actually touching this object and moving and rotating in the world. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. Let's see. So the next project that we did over the following year was Dead and Buried, and this was a virtual VR shooter in a set in a Western supernatural world. So the tech that we focused on this time is, now that we've learned how to track our hands, now we were incorporating facial tracking. So when you're talking to your friends, because this is a multiplayer shared experience, when you're talking to your friends, they can see your mouth and legs and everything, your mouth and lips and eyes moving. So then again, it just builds up that level of emotion, and you can see your emotional response. Even though you shoot your friend or something, like, you can see you laughing, or it's pretty interesting. The tech that was an upgrade from things that happened. One, we figured out how to actually have a better transitional animation sequence that's happening when you're grabbing objects. And two, you can actually grab objects off your persons, right off your body. So you can grab ammo, you can reload it. And it is, again, ramps up that level of just immersion that happens. So this was the tech that actually, funny enough, ended up being a patent, even though NASA was interested in it. So prior to, again, we would have you move your hands, your digits, and then the Oculus would fill in the gaps and run an animation sequence. But at this point, we figured out in a genius way of placing a seed point, which we refer to in objects. So I'm going to tell, so as you see, the test objects at the bottom there. Let's go with the simplest one, a ball. We put the seed point in the middle of it, and then the seed point would expand 360 degrees through the outer perimeter of that object. And these seed touch points. So you taking your digital hand and touching the objects, each point would acknowledge the speed, the pressure, the distance, and everything in which you're touching that object. So the animation would actually fit that. So in ultimate, in a weird way, there was no gap. It was real time. It was fluid. And it was quite impressive for us, I guess, when we're coming to just like making VR more viable and make it more immersive and realistic. So next we have the, I guess the final thing that I wanted to touch on was co-location in VR. It's a virtual shared space. So it's a shared instance. You and, in this case, 6 friends are in an arena, and we all playing a shared instance of that virtual space via your headset. And we've used Dead and Buried, one of our primary game in this experience here. So there it is. We had this event that we actually erected at one of our Facebook's main events that they have every year, F8, and also we did it also at GDC. But we created this thing called the Innovation Zone, and we're using our tech. And it was at this point we have full body tracking, facial tracking, hand tracking, and I guess full body tracking and hand tracking, all in one package in this scenario here. The arena I had to create, it was a 80 by 60 square foot arena. You can see our prototype with Mark Zuckerberg up there trying to test it out. It was it was right inside of a warehouse. We had to figure out a way to have the camera track our bodies. In addition to that, implement all the tools that we used prior to make sure this experience feels grounded, and you don't have to worry about that dispense of belief when when you see that delay or anything like that. So it needed to be super fluid. And as you can see, there was crazy long lines for this event here when we were able to pull it off. The tools or the tech that we use the Oculus Quest, of course, which was name dropped several times, and if needed be, because sometimes we'd have a memory issues, we'd go with the Oculus Rift S, which is a bit more, way more horsepower of a unit. Designing the experience, we essentially had to design a level, which I created to the left here, and the level would be overlaid into the real world. And so we have to use these objects. So for instance, you see in the middle image here, we have these crates and barrels and things like that. And we'd have to align it to the centimeter to make sure there's no discrepancy in the virtual space. And one thing I enjoyed when we were playing this, you get this sense of like tactileness when you're moving around and you're leaning against these objects, and your brain again just starts filling in the gaps, and then that level of immersion gets heightened because you're literally behind cover, or you think you're behind this crate, or you think you're behind this wagon that's turned over, and you're shooting your friends. It was a pretty intense experience. Here's the arena that we mocked up for the experience here. The bottom screens there, those are the screens that's televising the events. If you're wondering what those white pieces of tapes are, that's basically for the systems to align itself, and it doesn't lose. Those are basically control points for our system to track and know distances within the space. Now, the tech that we created there is called Oculus Insight. At the top of the arena, you have this server, and the server have the cameras. And each person within this, all 6 players will have their cameras scan the room. So we have 6 instances of 3-dimensional scanning of that space sent up to the server. So 2 things happen. 1, the server knows exactly where everything's aligned, and 2, is able to track that instance via instant being the player in that space. So they'll be able to move around in the space, and everything for all 6 will be consistent. So as the player comes into the space, they walk up to the central portion, and just like in if any Trekkies in the room, a Star Trek, you walk into the holodeck and you completely get digitized. That's exactly what happens here. So all 6 of you come in, you sit down, you would put your hands to your side, and then the system would completely digitize you and put an avatar over your body, and you're transported to this Western shooter. And again, which I was stating before, you have the server. So it's kind of a diagram of what happens. Users, server, shared server through the system. The system overlays everything, spits it back out into your headsets, and then you guys are ready to go. And that's sort of the experience there. You can't see the camera up top. It's pretty small actually, but it's in the dead center. But that's what's allowing a lot of this to happen. And an added piece of safety, the Guardian system in which we added was to make sure you don't run into walls. So the system would actually, system or manually, you create a boundary into the space, so it protects you from running into objects or even outside players who aren't wearing headsets, because they won't be picked up into the system. And last but not least, I will show you the Innovation Zone, the shared space VR co-location experience here. So as you can see, they're being digitized and brought into the space there. This is what we called the window. Wherever you move it around the world, you can like follow and see what's going on. That's our eyes to what they're seeing.
All right, are you on transport? Now turn around and go into the spot. Down there.
it's funny when you actually watch some of the players, they'll get so involved, you'll see them sliding across the the cover and everything and moving around and sweating, and it's pretty nice. That's the guy just throwing a grenade. He picked up something in the world and tossed it across the opponent's side. Time here, there's credits here, but yeah, that was the innovation zone. Last is, again, it's unfortunate I can't say what we're working on here, but let's say it is a marriage of narrative, world building, and games and films. Not a game based off a film, but the technology that's being used to convey deep narrative that we're trying to build in this in our game here. So soon stuff will be announced on this, but I'm super excited for this project here. But yeah, that is it from me. Thank you guys.